Hello, welcome to Code Live. My name is Kevin Porman, and today with me I have the esteemed Stefan Chandler Garcia. Today we're going to be working on doing some work with Salesforce Functions, and specifically we're going to be creating some code that will take some information from Salesforce, send it over to our function, and what we get back is a QR code. Now this is a demo we've shown you before, but I don't think we've ever shown in how we built it. We've never actually gone in and built it. So today that's what we're going to do. Stefan, do you want to say anything about yourself or anything before I throw out one bit of housekeeping?
Yep. Hi everyone, Stefan here. It's great to be talking about functions today, and I think it'll be really cool to take a look behind the scenes to see how we really get started and through that whole build and development process of functions. So hopefully you can come away with some new learnings today.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this is actually broadcasting on Turkey Day, or Thanksgiving Day, as it were. So if you are in the United States, hopefully you're watching this on demand. If you're not in the United States, just be aware that we don't have chat today. There's not going to be a way for you to ask questions and for us to respond. However, if you leave comments on the YouTube videos, we will know about them and be able to respond that way. So with that said, Stefan, all I've done is connect to a DevHub org that has functions enabled. And then I've got nothing else here. Like, we're in a different project. We're starting from scratch. What do we do?
So it's worth noting most of what we're going to do today is going to happen locally. And so what we can do is start out by creating a new Salesforce DX project. So let's create a project for our example today. Like I said, functions is already enabled. And do we have functions in the scratch org definition?
No, well, we don't have a project yet. Of course, for whatever reason, my terminal has decided, of course, to stop working. We are stuck on cd ... I'm going to spin up another one here.
Cool.
Okay. Let me close this one down, the old one, and I'll make my... We can give you write access to this as well.
Great.
Okay, so SFDX, force project create functions demo.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, and we can go into functions demo. And let's open this up. And so, okay, so we've created this. We've opened our project in Visual Studio Code, and what are we? I mean, we've got some files here. You mentioned looking at the config file.
Yep. So the first thing we need to do is enable functions in our scratch org.
And is that a setting or a feature?
It's a feature.
Okay.
And so we can do that by just adding functions into our feature list here. And so I'm going to go ahead and add functions in as a feature.
That was easy.
And like that. Yep. So that will then give us access to creating, doesn't like that, but creating functions in our scratch org.
Okay. Now it occurs to me we probably also need to run npm install. And
on a project.
I was doing this earlier today, and I ran into this being an issue, so I'm just going to save that there, and then we'll run npm install. Let it do its thing. While it's doing its thing, we can create a scratch org.
Yep.
And we'll use that, and we'll call it functions demo. I'm going to leave it around for 30 days. So we got two things going on here. We're creating the scratch org in the background. We're also installing all of our npm dependencies. Now, these npm dependencies are the ones that are for every Salesforce project created by the SFDX command line. And okay, there we go. We got all that configured. We got both of those run. I think we're off to the races.
Cool. And we've got a scratch org now. Perfect. So now functions live in our Salesforce DX project, but in a slightly different part of it. And we can expose a function by just kind of creating one. And it's going to go and scaffold up the functions folder and everything that we need for a function. And the first thing that we want to do that is go through, and we're going to run, actually finish setting up our environment.
Oh, what do we have to do?
We need to create our compute environment first. before we go ahead and do this.
Okay.
And so we can do that by running in the terminal. Do I have access as well now?
You should.
Okay, and so we can run sf in create compute. And that's going to create a compute environment for us.
Okay.
We then have to specify our org alias. And so in this case, our org alias is
Functions demo.
Yep. And so we've got a -o for org. Okay. And then we can name our compute environment. And we're going to go ahead and give it the same name just for consistency. So that will be -a.
Now, I notice you're using the SF Unified CLI. Is that because the plugins for the function side don't exist in SFDX, or just because you're more familiar with it? Oh.
Just because it's meant to... all of the function stuff is under the Unified CLI.
Gotcha.
And we're getting an error there as well from the CLI.
Yeah, it was EVN instead of ENV.
Thank you. Great. There you
Uh-oh.
Okay. Yep, login functions. Behind a step real quick here. There we go. Okay, and so you're going to log in here with your production functions enabled org.
My dev org?
Yes.
See if I can remember my password. There we go.
Yep, right. Okay.
Uh-oh.
What's that error say? Sorry, it's a bit blurry on my end.
We encountered an error while processing your request. Couldn't find that sales org connection. Please check that your inputs and configuration are correct before trying again.
Was the default dev hub set when creating the Scratch org as the functions org?
It should have been. Let's do dxforce org list. Make this a little taller. All right, so my functions demo is
your default dev hub.
My default dev hub. My default user is functions demo for the Scratch org. And this is the one that would have been created today, just now.
Yep.
So yeah, shall we try that again?
Yeah, let's try that one more time.
Okay.
And then we'll check something out in the org.
Okay, so hey, I remember my password the first time there. Okay, that didn't seem to work.
Okay, can you log into that org itself?
The Scratch org or the Dev Hub org?
The Dev Hub org.
Okay, I'm in there.
Okay, can you go into setup?
Mm-hmm.
And then functions.
It's giving me some boilerplate about what functions are, and it's not actually showing it to me.
And are you confident this is the org that you signed up for the trial with? Because it should show us a connection status here.
Yeah, 1 second. I'm gonna take this over here, and then I only have one. I only have one. Yeah.
Let me log into mine real quick and just make sure that that's what.
What the company settings, and Calendar set company information. This is the developer edition that has been.
It's a developer edition. It should be an enterprise edition.
So let me try this one, because maybe I have the wrong thing. So.
Yeah.
I think I know what happened. Don't remind me later. Yeah, this is what it was.
Cool. Okay.
I had the wrong dev hub, so let me fix that.
That's okay. Yeah. What do you want to do?
What we're going to do is we're going to go back to having created our dev hub.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I'm gonna just tell Julian. This is fun. Don't you love functions?
All right, you ready to kick back in?
Yep. Where are we kicking back in here? We just created the scratch org.
I'm going to create a new scratch org.
Yeah, so let's start. Are we starting from kind of the beginning? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
So now I'm going to create a new scratch org with the default, and I'll leave it functions demo. I'm going to annotate this one to be functions demo scratch org, so I can tell what it is.
Yeah. Good. Great idea.
And we'll let that run. And then you said the next thing we have to do is kind of like log in.
Yeah, so we're going to log in and authenticate this against our production functions org.
And that's going to be...
Yep, so that's been created. So we're just going to sf login functions.
Okay.
And that's going to open up the window for us. Now, you have to remember this is your production compute environment that you should be logging into in this case.
So that's going to be... Okay.
Great.
Okay. Success.
Perfect. Yep, so we can now access our Salesforce org with functions.
Okay.
Okay, so the next thing we need to do is create a compute environment for this org. And now, it's important to note that functions run within that trusted boundary of Salesforce, but they're not actually on your Salesforce org. There's a separate compute environment that we're going to build currently that will allow you to deploy and run your functions. Now, it's important to note you have a production environment and you have a test environment. So those two do sit separately. However, in this case, because we're running against a trial org, we're going to be deploying into our production environment. So we've already got that switched on in the org by default. We can go ahead and create one now for us to use through the command line.
Okay, and what do we do for that?
Yep. So we're going to run a command, and that is going to be sf environment env. So sf env create compute.
Do you want to type or you want me to type here?
Yeah, I can go ahead and do it. So sf env create compute.
Pause right there, because you did EVN.
Oh my gosh.
Hey man, typing is hard.
env, yep, got it. Okay, so we're going to run the sf environment create compute, and then we can specify our org. And so we're going to set that as it's functions demo SL, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we can set the name of our compute environment. Okay, -C. And then we can give that a name, and that one is going to be, -A.
So like functions demo CE.
Yeah. There we go. And so that's going to go through and create that environment for us.
Except we had a typo. 1 second, I can fix it.
Yep.
I think there's like a lag on the...
Oh, yeah.
All right, there we go. Okay, so it's creating our compute environment. The compute environment is a container where our stuff is going to run, is access to a server where our stuff is going to run. What is the compute environment?
So it's pretty much a managed runtime for your functions that we're hosting that you can interact with really easily without having to actually do a call out. So
Okay.
you have direct access to it from Apex, which we'll go through in a little bit. Now, if you want to see a list of all your environments, you can now run sf end list, and it's going to show you all of those from your org.
Oh, look at that. It's a nice table.
Yep. And so there you have all of your Scratch orgs, your dev hubs, everything that you need in one sort of formal list that you can see.
I like it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we've logged in. We have a compute environment set up. I feel like this is stuff. Everything we've done so far is stuff you have to do like once per project, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, once per project. And now we should be ready to create our first function. So, do you want to get started?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Cool. So, to create your function, we do it just from the command line at the moment. And you can run sf generate function. And then dash in for a name. We'll give it a name.
QR code generator.
Yep. And then dash L for the language. And let's go JavaScript.
Now, just to remind me, we have JavaScript and we have Java. Are there any others?
Yep, JavaScript, Java, and TypeScript.
TypeScript, okay.
Yep, Python is on the roadmap, and there are more to come in future as well. So please let us know what languages you'd like to see as we start to expand those.
Okay, and we've added functions to our feature list already.
Yep, so let's see. It's not letting us. Can you check the Scratch org definition here?
Oh, it created it for us. We've got our function here.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah, it created this JavaScript function, QR code generator.
Fine. Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting that it sent us that message, but hey ho, we have functions here already added. Okay, so you'll see we now have a functions folder right under our force-app folder.
Mm-hmm.
And we now have a function. Now, it's created all that scaffolding for us, and all that's really important at the moment is our index.js. That's where our function is going to run. Now, if you take a look through that file, the important thing that we need to note is that export here in our function, that is just exporting an async function. Okay, this is what's going to run every time your function is invoked.
Okay.
And so, if you want to go ahead and go into that folder directory, so
into this folders directory?
Yep, so into functions, and then into our QR code function.
Okay.
In the terminal.
Oh, in the terminal. Okay, hold on a second. I have a pet peeve of mine here where I get the formatting messed up, so I was going to copy it, the prettier file here for us. So that, there we go, and then if I go into the command line and I go into functions, is it functions?
Yep.
QR code generator.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. And then run npm install to install all of the package dependencies here.
And that's got its own package JSON. That's
it does, yeah.
Isolated directory-wise from my package JSON for the rest of the project?
Yep, it is, yeah. There's a whole separate set of modules and dependencies that we might be adding that we want inside of our function, but don't want in our SFDX project or other functions.
Okay.
Now,
I'm just going to open this to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's great. And so in the function itself, you'll see we have three things that are being passed into the function itself. We've got the event, and that event contains the payload from your Salesforce org when you're calling the function.
Okay.
We have the context that gives you access to the org, and so you can query things against your org. You can run SOQL queries like you see in the example below that's been generated by default. You can see here we've got context.org, and then we can access the data API there to run SOQL queries. We can create data with the context, and we can get information about the org itself, about the user that's running the function. all kinds of really cool stuff. So we're going to take advantage of that in a minute, and then we've got the logger that just allows us to log into the console in a nice, safe way. Now,
Okay.
you said we wanted to create a QR code and pass that back to Salesforce
Yeah.
in our example. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, nice and simple example, right? Should be simple.
Yeah, totally. Very. So there are many QR code generating libraries in NPM, so in Node Package Manager, that are open source, pretty much projects and modules that you can bring right into your JavaScript applications.
Mm-hmm.
A very similar concept exists for Java as well, but like I said, we're focusing on JavaScript today. Should we install that from NPM?
Yeah, you want to do it on NPM or do you want to do it in the package.json file?
Let's just do it in NPM. So you can just run npm install, and then QR code is the package that we're going to be using.
And we want to save it for dev, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so this is going to actually edit this package.json file for us and put that package in here. You see it just popped up there.
Yep.
And I'm just going to go ahead and close that. All right, we've added that, so we should be good, right?
Yep, totally.
Okay.
And the first thing that we're going to want to do then to actually use that in our function is import it. Okay, so right at the very top of our file, I'm going to go ahead and add in our import there for our QR code reader. And so we can import a module into our function by just writing the import keyword, then the name of our module, and then where it's from. So from QR code.
Now this feels very similar to a Lightning Web Component import.
Yep, totally. Yep, and we do all of the compiling on our side, so we can handle CommonJS and ES6 modules within the function, so that you can format it. And if you check the docs, there's always a guide on sort of how to do the import based on the type of module. But so that should give us access to that QR code function.
As under the handler of QR code with a capital QR and C.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct. And so the next thing we're going to want to do before we actually generate the QR code, so we've got our QR code here.
Mm-hmm.
Module, it's imported. Should we query some data from Salesforce? So obviously we're going to trigger this action. Do you want to pass in an ID from Salesforce? What do you think is the best approach?
I've been thinking about that, and I don't know what the best approach is. I was going to ask you, should we pass in all the data we need into the function from Salesforce, or should we pass the bare minimum in and let the function go and query that data?
It really has to do with the data volumes.
Okay.
In this case, the function is only going to be invoked with a single ID. So we don't necessarily need to query against the database. It's possible. However, we can have most of that information in our trigger anyways when we're calling the function itself.
Let's just pass it in then. That seems the simpler thing.
Yep. So what you would see is then an ID coming from the event or any data we need. If we're going to create a QR code, in this case, let's just point to the record that's creating the QR code itself, so we can pass in a record ID and go right to that record in the link.
Okay.
So we'd pass that in via the event. And so you can see here in this logger, when the function's called, we're just invoking that QR code generator with the payload, and then it's taking that event.data. Okay, when that's coming in from Salesforce, it's going to just attach that ID to event.data as our parameter. And so we could say event.data.id, and that will give us our ID field from the record that we're passing in.
So that data object, event.data, is a JSON object?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that payload is coming in from Apex as JSON.
So we could just change that to say .id.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be case sensitive because JavaScript is case sensitive. Yep. And is it capital ID, or how does that get passed to us in JSON?
In this case, if it's coming from Apex, it'll be a capital ID.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Cool. So, and this is in that variable substitution block that JavaScript has now, where you can do that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's just using a template to pass in a property inside of a string. So you use backticks instead of single quotes to create the string, and then it allows you to merge in properties there, and it's very, very handy in creating stuff. And so we've got that ID coming in from Salesforce. We want to just generate a link in the org.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can do that pretty easily using that Salesforce SDK. We talked earlier about having access to the org via that context. And so what we can do is actually in that, let's go ahead and construct that URL.
Okay.
So we can create a constant here. And we can call that record URL equals. And then once again, like Kevin just said, we can use those backticks here to create our string. And we're going to just go ahead and use $, curly brackets to open up that property. And we can actually just type in context.org. Okay, and then from our org, we have information about the org, like the API version, the domain URL, the base URL. And in this case, we can type in .base URL. And that's going to give us access to the actual URL of our org. Then the next thing we would need to do is just put in our /, and we can create another
$sign
here.
Yep.
Yep. And we could get events.data.id. And pretty much in that template, we're taking the URL of our org and combining that with the record ID that we're passing in via the payload and creating a direct link to that record in Salesforce. We can then use that to then generate the QR code.
That can be the data of our QR code.
It is, yeah.
I like it.
That's where the QR code will point. Okay.
Very nice.
Okay, and then we don't need this query any longer, where we're querying for that data API, because we don't really need that information currently in this part of the function. But it's important to know that if you do need access to more Salesforce data, you can write SOQL directly in your functions through that data API. And so I'm going to go ahead and just remove that. Okay, and then we can go ahead and, do you want to check out and see what this URL looks like when the function's running?
Yeah, I'm just going to put the record URL in here.
Yeah,
so
great.
we get that.
And then let's return the record URL for now.
Okay. I was going to say we don't have a results to return. So save this,
Nope.
I imagine.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, and so in order to run the function, we can just go ahead and really just type in sfrun function start into the command line, and that's going to run our function. Don't forget, we're already in the directory, so we're running this right from that functions directory.
So we need to run the function start from a particular function, not from our project.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
From the particular function.
And it looks like we've got an error.
Do you want to run an install on it just to check what's going on? Do you have Docker desktop running?
I have it installed. I do not have it running, which I suspect
So
is what the issue is.
Yep, you do have to have Docker desktop running to run the containers locally. So it's important to know each function itself is running in a Docker container, so that when it's deployed, it builds the image in the same way that it's building on your machine, so you can truly replicate it.
Let's see if I started this too quickly. There we go.
That's right. It's a great lesson. Oh,
Still not set up. We're waiting on. Okay, thank you. Now that it's running. These are the little like gotchas that I really was hoping we would encounter, so that other people can, be like, oh yeah, I don't need to. I know what happens what to do when this occurs.
yeah, totally.
All right, so we've pulled a bunch of stuff, and it's building a container for our function, running it in this directory, and then I assume we've got some way of interacting with our containerized function.
Yep. Yeah, we can invoke it directly from the command line, and so once that's running, we can set it up now. We're not running just yet, but you can open up a new terminal.
Okay, and I'm going to make sure you have write access to this one as well.
Yep, and I can type this in. And so once that's done, we'll go ahead and type it in. You can type in sfrun function, and then give it a location, and in this case it's running locally. So it's running on localhost 8080.
Okay.
And then you can pass it in a payload.
Which is that JSON object.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we've got just a fake ID in there. It's not a real Salesforce ID associated to this org, but we can actually run this from the command line and simulate it like we're actually passing in a record ID there.
Except that our function didn't build right.
Nope. Great. Let's check it out.
Could not load function. Cannot load module referenced in main of package JSON.
Let's see.
Could not find QR code.
Perfect chance for some debugging. Get rid of that. Can you run an npm install again?
Yep. Oh, you know what? We added it, but I don't know that we ever ran install.
Yeah.
That could be why.
Yep. So let's run
function start.
Function start. Let's build this again.
I envision a bright, shiny future where there's tighter tooling around this with Visual Studio Code. So like when you make a change, after so many seconds, it rebuilds it for you in the background. And
yeah,
I can just imagine all sorts of really cool optimizations to this. But right now, if we make a change to our function here, we have to rebuild and restart the function. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that's. I've seen some cool stuff coming. We won't talk about too much of it yet, but there's some cool VS Code stuff coming for functions as well.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, Stefan has seen some things.
I have.
Yes.
I've seen many things. Okay.
I still could not find the package QR code.
Okay, let's see what's going on here.
Is it QR code, or do we need to... I mean, NPM pulled it, right? If we look in our node modules, we have... We scroll down through the 500 node modules it installed. It found QR code, so I feel like that should work.
Let's see, what could be happening here?
Do we need to put brackets around it like we do in LWC?
No, we do not.
Okay.
I have verified this.
Okay. It also occurs to me that this is not a saved file.
That would be why, probably.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I don't know that it did anything different. I didn't see anything change, but we'll try this again. One of the things I really like about the Docker workflow is that once you've downloaded something, it's not going to go re-download it. It'll only check to see if you've got it before going and getting it. So the more times you run this function start, the faster it's going to be. Lots of info messages. Running, maybe? No.
No, it's still not liking that. Not load module reference in main of packaged objects.
So if we look at the package.json.
Yeah, let's see.
Cannot load module reference in main, so that's this index.js. If we look at our index.js, cannot find imported from /workspace. So it doesn't like QR code.
No. Weird. Let me I'm just gonna run this. npm install save QR code.
I was just looking in the node modules, I saw it there.
It's there, that's the latest version. a great example of debugging your first function with a library.
The good news about functions is you have this whole ecosystem of libraries to work with. The bad news about functions is you have this whole ecosystem of libraries to work with.
Yeah.
Well, it occurs to me that we haven't done anything with this yet. And we don't actually need it in order to just see the function run. Because right now we're just pulling the record URL and the ID that's passed in.
Exactly. I'm just confirming that this is the correct method.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, you're looking this up on the documentation?
I have a function that uses this.
Oh.
And so I'm making sure that mine is still building today.
Gotcha.
I'm checking the format of my package.json and my dependencies.
Out of curiosity, what is this project.toml?
So the project.toml is the project and function information. So it's kind of like a definition file for your function.
Gotcha.
In the specific project itself. And yes, I'm running fine on mine. However, in my package.json, it's not a dev dependency.
It's just a dependency?
It's just a dependency. So
well, we can fix that.
Go ahead and I'm just going to paste that in here. Dependency, and then get rid of that there. And there. Give that a comma.
npm install?
Yep. Let's see if that makes a difference. It's a good lesson to learn.
Yeah.
If what is incorrect.
Now, if I understand things correctly, and I would not consider myself a JavaScript nerd, but if I understand things correctly, in the NPM world, the difference between a dependency and a dev dependency is whether or not it's loaded during runtime or during development.
Yes, and so I assume it thinks it's running. It's running this as a production instance of the function, so it's going to dependencies.
Not dev dependencies.
It's looking for dependencies and not the dev dependencies.
Gotcha.
Because obviously, ESLint, Sen, and Chai aren't going to be running in actual build; they'll be running in tests.
And that makes perfect sense now that we've sort of talked it through.
Yeah, I totally lost that. However, it still can't find.
We didn't save the package JSON, did we?
I think I did. Can I find the QR code? Workspace syntax.js. We're in function.
I mean, everything I'm reading about this seems like it would be working fine.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some other dependency here that is newer on mine than it is on yours. Yeah. It's causing an issue.
Let's see. Let's check. It's all the same. Same correct node version.
Oh, look at that. Now it works.
Correct. Now it works?
We hadn't saved the package JSON.
Brilliant. Okay. So our function is running now. So now that we've got the payload already typed in, go ahead and click on that and press return. Let's see. Do we have a URL back? There we go. So it's created that reference for us using the context to grab the org information and the record ID that we've passed in. Now, obviously, that isn't going to be open to a record because it's not one of the IDs from our org. But now, if you go into your other terminal window, you can see the logger working. And you can see there that we're invoking the QR code generator with payload. And then, which we can check what that is. And then writing the URL as the message down below that.
And the record ID we passed in as a lowercase I.
We did. Yeah, it should be an
Okay,
uppercase.
so I'm just going to fix this before we confuse ourselves in the future.
Thank you.
Why?
Fix
It
that
just
in
worked.
Taylor.
Why is it not working now? Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so
Would be right.
we've got a record URL being created. We've got our data being generated.
Yep.
And now we need to turn this into a QR code.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and do that using that module that we've imported. And so we're going to go back into the index.js.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And let's create another function down below our function just to abstract this a little bit, because we don't want to put too much logic into our main function, because then it gets a little bit confusing and it's harder to read for someone who's exploring it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we will be doing in Apex.
So what's a good
It's
heuristic
actually
for the
really
length
quickly.
of our function?
The function itself isn't going to be longer, really, than 20 or 30 lines, depending on the complexity.
Okay.
We're not working with a lot of code here. I mean, functions are meant to do one thing well and one thing fast. And so in this case, its one thing is to go and create the QR code and bring it back to Salesforce.
Okay.
Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create an async function down here. And so we're just going to write async and then function and give it a name. And in this case, it'll just be generate QR. Okay. And then let's go ahead and pass in a string as our URL. And so let's just type in string there. And so we can pass our URL into our generate function and have it create a QR code for us and return it.
Okay.
Okay. And so in this case, let's go ahead and just write a return statement. And then that's where we can actually use our QR code module. And so we're just going to say QR code that we've defined at the top here. So you can see at the very top, we've defined that QR code.
Mm-hmm.
And then here we can say to.toData URL, which is a method that's provided by the actual library itself. And then we can pass in, first off, the URL. So let's go ahead and type in URL there. And then we can give it some options. Okay, things like the color of the QR code and a little bit more information. And I'm going to go ahead and just paste those in here. And we're going to go ahead and paste those in at the top of our function here. And so then we have our options here. And so we've been able to set the color of the actual QR code and then the background here.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
we're going to pass those in as well. Just something that we'll go through quickly. And so we can pass in the URL, and then the options.
Okay.
And that's it. That's all that this library needs to create a QR code for us. And what it's going to return is a string that's a base 64 that we can then use to return to Salesforce.
Okay.
And that's pretty much, it's a string representation of the image that when passed to Salesforce, Salesforce knows to render it as an image.
Okay. I'm like with that single line of code in there.
Yep.
Like it feels like maybe its own function is
Yeah,
a little over engineered.
We probably didn't need to
Okay.
leave it out.
But
If we want to do proper error handling, probably it'd be a little bit longer. But in this case, we'd normally wrap it with a try catch.
yeah, okay,
Catch
that
the
makes more
error.
sense.
And so there'd be quite a bit more boilerplate there, but just for the purpose of time today, we wanted to get that out quickly.
Gotcha.
And
So
then, yep,
right, go ahead.
take it away. Well, I'm sure you can assume. So what we want to do next is go up to the top of our function and then just go and get that QR code. And so we are going to be modifying this code, and I'll explain why in a minute, but we're going to go ahead and just say type in a let here and call that QR code, and then equals, and actually let's just call it code so that we don't conflict with the name of our library.
Right.
Equals, and then we can just say here we want to await that because it is asynchronous, and then run generate QR, and then pass in our URL.
Again, this is seeming very easy and simple, and
Yeah.
I was expecting more complexity.
No, we're not writing a lot of code.
Okay.
So in that case, should we log that and return it so that we can see what that looks like? So that we can
With the
make
string.
some strings. Yep,
Yeah.
in the right format.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and put that code here in our logger, and then let's return that code now as well. I've saved that, and then do we want to rerun it? So should we rebuild the function?
Yeah. So let's go back over here, and we'll cancel it. Run it again. Watching it build is exciting. Do you remember back when Maven's Mate was all the rage, and when you were deploying, you could play video games?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool to. And somebody should build that in as a Visual Studio Code extension. Well, while it's building, you can sit there and play a classic video game.
Yep, I think it'd be a great idea. I don't know if it'd be the most productive thing,
Well,
but neither is just watching the function build.
I've always thought maybe you could have like an ebook reader that popped up, show you a random class in Salesforce to teach you about. All right, looks like it started.
Yep, great. So we're testing this because of an issue that I hit when building the QR code before, and when we run this, you'll see the response that we get back. See, is a very long string.
Yeah.
Which is our actual text representation of this image.
Okay.
However, we need to strip out the actual definition of the string at the top where it says data image
So this portion?
-png, yeah,
Yeah.
in base64. So we actually are going to need to strip that out of our string
Okay.
in order to send this to Salesforce. Once we do that, we've got a proper base64 string that we can pass right into Salesforce and create our document with.
So is it everything up to the comma after base64?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, so everything up to the comma. So all we have to do then is in our function itself, we can take that code property here, and we can say code equals code.replace, and then I've already copied and pasted that string here. Wait, go and put that in. That little bit of the string that we don't actually need, and we're just going to replace it with nothing, just an empty string. And so that way, when we go to insert this into Salesforce, we have just the base64 that we need to insert the QR code.
Okay.
Cool. And so that pretty much takes us to the point where we've been able to take that ID, generate a record URL, and then create our QR code that points right to that URL. Should we insert this into Salesforce?
Oh, yes. We're going to do it as like an attachment?
Yeah, so let's just insert a content version.
Okay.
For now. We won't get super fancy and attached to anything, but let's insert a content document through a content version here.
Okay. Select content.
So, nope.
Oh.
Slightly more complicated, but easier than you would imagine.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing we need to do is actually create a unit of work, which is part of the data API that's provided by Functions. And so a unit of work pattern allows you to create loads of graphs of records that we can insert all in a single transaction in our function.
Okay.
And so each graph can contain multiple parent-child relationships and perform CRUD on them into Salesforce.
Makes sense.
And so to create a unit of work, we're just going to create a constant, and we can just call it UOW, and then equals context.org.data API, capital A, yep, and then .new unit of work. You have to actually type out unit of work. There you go.
Okay.
And that's it. And so that pretty much instantiates our unit of work that we can then start to construct our objects around.
Okay.
And so the next thing we want to do is we're going to create a constant for our content version, and just call this const content version ID. And it's going to store the result ID as that content version ID. And then we can just take our unit of work property and just say UOW dot. In this case, we're going to type in register create. and that's going to register the actual creation of an object. And so just type in a parentheses and then a curly there. Okay, and then we're going to give it a couple of fields. And so the first thing we want to do is type in type. And so we're going to create type here, and it's actually an actual object, so not a string. So we don't need the quotes around type. And that is going to be content, then quotes and content version, capital C.
Oh, okay.
That's object name.
It's important to remember that JavaScript is case sensitive.
Yes. And then the next one is the fields property. Okay. And then this is going to be an object. And so not an array. So we need some curlies there. And then we can just type in our field names. And so the required fields that we need for a content version are going to be title. And so capital T title. Because now we're working with Salesforce fields and labels. And so title and then QR code. Then we need the path on client field. Cool. Sorry, it's inside of the fields.
Oh.
Actually. So we can define all of our Salesforce fields in here.
So path on client.
Mm-hmm. And let's just call this QR code.png.
Okay.
And then the next field we need is the actual version data itself. If you've ever inserted content versions, this is key.
And so this is just going to be our code.
Yep.
Okay.
And then last thing we need is the origin, which is just going to be the letter H. Capital H there for that. And then we need a comma after the title.
I was wondering why that was being angry.
Okay, and so that's pretty much defined our record for us. So we can now actually run the unit of work to insert that into Salesforce. Now, if you're working with a large data set, you can create as many units of work as you like. You can create multiple parent-child relationships. So if we wanted to add a content share here, we could add a content share into here, etc. And it's very well documented to go in and look at the different combinations.
I just want to
great examples in functions recipes.
I want to pull up one thing here. Content version as object, because I think there's a first published location. Content version.
In
field.
content, yes.
Because if
Actually,
so,
yeah, you probably could do that.
So we've got field. Is it first? Published. This is first published location ID. And so I'm going to take that and I'm going to do this and do event.data.id.
Yep.
Like that. So this will take care of creating the content version, the content doc, and the content document relation or content document link. Content document link for us.
Yeah.
Cool. All within one. So we just need to make sure that that ID actually exists in our org.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and so now let's go ahead and actually commit this.
Okay.
And so we will properly, let's write a try catch here. And in our try, let's create just a constant for the response. And then await, because it is asynchronous, and then context.org .data API. Then we're going to type in .commit unit of work. Cool, and then just pass in our UOW. Cool. And then, just so that we can see the results, let's go ahead and just create a constant for our results.
We have the response one, right?
Yeah, actually, we can just use the response. Well, it gets returned in, I think it's a map, but let's go ahead and catch that, and then pass in just the error into the catch. So parentheses, and yep, cool. And then there, let's just throw a new error. capital E error, and then pass in error.message. Cool. Fine. And that will catch that for us.
Okay.
Okay, and then we should be able to actually run this and insert our image.
I'm going to save it first because we learned that the hard way.
Yep, and let's go ahead and let's, in the logger, let's pass in the response. I'll get that here, so let's take the response there, constant, and pass that into the logger, and then let's actually return that response as well. I'll save that again. Cool. Save again. Do you want to rebuild it and run it?
And while we're doing that, I'm going to open default org.
Yeah, do it.
And create an account so we have the ID that'll...
A real one?
A real one, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because we're going to get an error actually when we run it with an incorrect one.
So I'm going to go to sales, allow, and we'll do accounts, new account. We're going to do demo account. We don't need anything else. We'll just save it. And that account ID is now copied. So when we come back over here...
Yep, let's make sure we're running.
Okay, we're running.
Just about, yep, we're good.
Okay, and then...
Cool. Version. Oh, version data. That's it.
Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to reiterate how to make it build. SF run functions start will rebuild your function project.
Yep. And if you didn't know that you can insert the version data into the content version object, it accepts a text version or a base 64 of any type of content. You can either assign it a type or it'll detect the type based on what you submit to it.
What is the origin? Is that whether or not it's hosted by Salesforce?
No, the origin, I'm pretty sure the origin has to do with the sharing of it.
I had the, let's look at the origin property here.
Yeah, oh yeah, you've got the doc open ID.
Content is C if it's from the user's personal library. H is Salesforce file from users my files.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's where the document, I guess in theory, was uploaded is the origin.
Yep. Okay. Let's run this again. No whammies, no whammies. Response is not defined. Did I misspell response? Oh, it's only used inside the try catch, so it's out of scope here.
Yeah, so we can't. Yeah, good shout. So let's do that. Sure, should put that inside the.
Yeah, I'll just put that inside the try. And then do we just throw an error if nothing else, if we get past this? Well, no, because the catch will automatically throw an error.
Yeah.
So, okay. Once more into the getting it to build. We are right at time, so I'm really hoping this next one goes perfect because we are, right at our time here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Code Live this week. I know it wasn't live, so we'll say Code Premiere instead of Code Live.
Yeah.
On functions, I've learned a whole lot about doing functions. This is something net new to me. I'm not even a JavaScript nerd, and I've learned a whole lot about this. Fingers crossed this is going to work. We'll be able to see our file attachment in the UI here in just a second as soon as this finishes building. And then, yeah, we've got some more functions content coming up in the new year. And I'm looking forward to that too. Let's see how it happens, how it works this time.
Yep, and maybe we can actually show you how to trigger this from Salesforce.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay, great.
The response
So
was
let's
nothing.
go. It was, because I think we actually have to get the ID, but let's see if we have a file here.
I'm going to reload this. Oh, there's 2 of them.
Oh, great.
Oh, there's our QR code.
And okay.
Now
Great.
here's the acid test, ladies and gentlemen, my phone. I'm going to put this here and try and scan it with my phone and see what happens.
You're going to get the login page,
Yeah, probably.
which isn't bad.
It actually says go to salesforce.com. It's got my URL.
Yeah.
It's pulling it up. It wants me to open it in Salesforce 1, but I can open it in the browser here. This worked great. We did it.
Cool.
I'm really excited.
We got there. QR code to Salesforce.
QR code to Salesforce.
But and now actually triggering that from Salesforce is trivial.
Yeah?
It's super simple.
Like 5
You're
minutes
literally
trivial?
Just passing. Well, not if you're going to write the trigger. We can write the Apex class and run it, or we can run it from the command from the dev console.
All right, let's do it from let's do it from this dev console.
Yep. Sounds good.
I'm going to put this in Apex mode.
Yep.
All right?
You ready?
Yeah.
So, pretty much all you have to do is invoke the function. So we can, we don't actually need to create invoke. So let's just create a, functions is namespaced, and so you can call functions.function to actually get the function. So functions.function. Okay, and then give it a name because we're instantiating it.
Oh,
here.
okay.
So functions.function, and then you can call this like QR code function.
Okay.
Okay, and then equals functions.function.get. Okay, and then it's QR code. Yes, but we first need to put in before that the name of our space, and it's functions demo. What was our compute environment called?
Functions demo CE.
Yep. Dot QR code generator.
All is a string.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And then we could write functions dot function invocation.
Function invocations or invocation.
Yep, invocation.
Okay.
No, not plural. And then give that a name and just call it like invocation. Oh, nope, we don't have to do that.
No, okay.
Because we're going to just instantiate it. And equals our QR generator dot invoke and pass in our payload. So pass in an ID.
That's it?
I think actually we're gonna have to call it ID in this case because we're not passing in the address. This place is just
that's right.
ID.
So like a JSON?
It is, yes. It's JSON.
Okay.
Yep. And then if you run that, it should run a QR code generator.
Actually, here's what I'm going to do. For maximum wow, I'm going to switch back over to our logger. And then I'm going to execute anonymous with editor contents.
Is our...
It says it failed to run.
Hold on. Project.function format. Functions. Demo.ce.qr generator. Hold on, where are we in here? Let's see. QR code generator. Just gonna run SF list. It's functions demo SO, I think. Hold on.
SO.
So that's the connected org. The project name is this. Hold on, bear with me. Let's see it.
Nope, still doesn't. It's truncating it.
Yes.
there any way to make it just the compute environments? Oh, well, there we go.
Functions demo CE.
With a capital C. That's exactly what I have. I just copied and pasted it. And then the method, the actual name of it is QR code generator, all lowercase.
Yeah.
QR code generator.
Try putting in the space name as all lowercase, with the compute environment's name. Just checking this.
Like that?
Oh, of course, we're not deployed.
Oh.
So that would be why.
Okay.
Do we have time to deploy?
How long does it take?
We can try. So first off, commit to a Git repo. So you've got to commit to it. So you've got to commit all of these changes. The function has to be committed before you deploy it.
Okay.
Okay, and then you can run. Let's just see SF deploy functions -o and your org alias.
Our
Functions demo so. That would be why it couldn't find our function in the compute environment.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
I thought there was going to be some magic where it routed back to my local machine, but
Yeah.
this makes more sense.
So the logging actually will happen. No, we'd have to instantiate the logger to log it on your local machine, but it's possible.
I like how they've given me the little dots, the marching dots.
A feature of Outlive, the Open CLI framework.
We're very creative with our naming.
Yeah. There's lots of really cool stuff you can write into your CLI for status and progress. And so pretty much it's building your function again, productionizing it, and deploying it into your compute environment so that you can access it from your org directly. Takes slightly more time than running it locally. It's having to build the entire environment.
Watching it add these layers to it, it's fascinating. If you've not gotten a chance to play around with Docker, Docker is a very fascinating tool for. Okay, look, and we're done.
Okay, so let's try this again.
Okay. Still not found. It's not going to be. Well.
Executing from the correct org, right? Just to be sure.
Let's see. So this is the username it's using.
Yeah.
And we'll do stuff. Oh, that's right. We're not in a terminal. Here we go. And while we do that, the output, we capture that again. We'll look here. Functions demo SL. It's and this is the one we want it to be using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it needed a second to propagate still. Do you want to see if that's... we can access it again? If that's the correct name. Just make sure. Let's check this here.
So this is our project, right? Not the environment. Because this is saying it's in the project.function format.
Project function, try that.
And I think the project is just functions demo.
Yeah. No, functions demo, SO. Or is that the actual project name? Hold on.
That seemed to have worked with the project name.
Oh, okay.
Let's, we're missing our.
Correct, yeah.
Look at see what
So
they.
let's check it out in the org.
It looked like it invoked it and returned nothing.
Yep.
So let's look and see if in our org we now have a third one. No.
Fun. Okay. Well.
I'm going to try this one more time. Execute anonymous. Okay. That seemed to have worked. No errors. I wonder, what's the warm-up time for a function?
Well, I think this is where we might get into some permissions issues because we've not gone in and modified the permission set for the function to insert the file. So there, we'd have to debug the automated process user to make sure they have the right permissions. That's probably what it is.
Gotcha.
Is that it's not being added to the person. If you check out, go to the Files tab, it may be being inserted and just not associated. No. Yeah, I think this is where we'd have to go into permission sets and update the functions permission set a little bit to view files.
Okay, well, we are out of time, so we'll have to do that on a later adventure. Thank you very much for joining me, Stefan. This has been great. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you next week.